It's kind of funny, isn't it? We're swimming in information, like literally drowning in it sometimes.
Yeah, the entire internet in your pocket.
Exactly. But honestly, sometimes scrolling feels less like learning and more like just noise.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are definitely times when just not knowing feels, well, easier than facing something tough or complicated.
Oh, absolutely. That urge to just look away, to avoid the discomfort, it's really strong.
It makes you wonder, though, why? Why do we sometimes, actively resist knowing something, even when the info is right there?
What's really going on under the hood, so to speak?
Yeah, and that's pretty much what we're digging into today. We're doing a deep dive into this whole idea of choosing ignorance, you could say.
And we're drawing heavily on the work of Marynês Pereira. She's a neurobusiness expert, tons of experience over 40 years.
Right. Her article, The Anesthesia of Ignorance to the Discomfort of Consciousness, Hypocrisy and Voluntary Blindness, is really our guide here. It offers this fascinating neurobusiness take on it all.
So our mission, really, is to unpack why this happens, this sort of ostrich syndrome.
And what it tells us about ourselves, about how we navigate the world.
Pereira really nails this paradox, doesn't she? We live in this age of, total information access.
But people seem to be actively avoiding it sometimes.
Exactly. It's
Right.
less about not having the data and more about choosing not to engage.
And it's not just passive ignoring either. She uses some really vivid terms. Ostrich syndrome, or she even mentions tattoo syndrome.
Right, the whole burying your head in the sand image.
It sounds kind of simple, but she argues there's a deep neurological reason for it.
Yeah, from that neurobusiness perspective, it's basically a defense mechanism. A pretty powerful one.
Against what, though?
Against the pain, really. The mental discomfort of cognitive dissonance.
Okay, cognitive dissonance. That's when, new information clashes with what we already believe.
Exactly. When you're faced with stuff that challenges your worldview or maybe exposes things like manipulation, injustice, or even your own, passive role in something,
Yeah.
that creates this internal friction. And our brains really, really don't like that feeling.
So to get rid of the discomfort, sometimes the easiest way is just project the new information or ignore it.
Precisely. Pereira calls it seeking a false homeostasis. Basically, our brains find it easier, less energy intensive, to maintain a simple, consistent story. Even if that story isn't entirely accurate. It takes less work than constantly analyzing complex, messy, uncomfortable truths.
It's like our brain defaults to the energy-saving mode. Keep things simple, keep things comfortable.
Even if comfortable means sticking with a bit of a lie, it avoids that mental strain.
It's the easy answer, even if it's not the right answer. And Pereira connects this tendency, this willful blindness, to something else. She looks at who actually benefits from it.
Right, she brings in this idea of Ponerology.
Which is?
Well, in this context, she's using it to talk about the study of individuals, people with certain personality traits, often antisocial ones, who actively seek power to manipulate and control others.
Okay, so how does our tendency to look away connect with that?
Well, think about it. If a lot of people are choosing, consciously or not, to ignore uncomfortable truths, to not see manipulation for what it is.
It creates the perfect environment for those manipulators to operate, doesn't it?
Exactly. It gives them fertile ground. If no one's willing to call out the manipulation or even acknowledge it's happening,
They basically get a free pass.
yeah. And Pereira points out this kind of strange irony. We often see a lot of fear or suspicion directed towards, say, neutral tools like AI. Tools, which she argues, could actually help us uncover disinformation. But at the same time,
We ignore the actual humans pulling the strings, the ones spreading the lies.
that's her point. AI becomes a potential scapegoat, while the manipulators who thrive on our apathy often get less scrutiny. So our avoidance really opens the door for them.
It's like yelling about the potential danger of a screwdriver while someone's quietly using a crowbar next door.
Something like that, yeah.
This leads into another really unsettling idea she discusses. This concept of voluntary suicide. That sounds extreme.
It does, but she uses it to describe situations where people seem to ignore really clear warnings, neglecting their own well-being, almost like they're inviting harm.
How so?
She links it to extreme self-deception. If you absolutely refuse to acknowledge a danger or the potential negative consequences of your choices, or maybe your inaction.
You can carry on as if everything's fine.
Right. You maintain that comfortable, but ultimately maybe destructive illusion. Think about someone ignoring serious health symptoms because facing the potential reality is just too scary.
And this isn't just about hurting ourselves, is it? She talks about hypocrisy, too.
Yeah, the hypocrisy of staying silent when you see injustice, when things are clearly wrong, but it's happening to other people.
She asks that really pointed question, how many more will have to fall?
Mm-hmm. It suggests this willingness to overlook suffering, maybe, as long as it doesn't touch us directly. Or as
Yeah.
long as we can pretend it doesn't.
Which ties into another really dark concept she raises, social Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah, that's a disturbing one. It's floated as a potential explanation for why a whole group, a society even, might seem to tolerate or even develop a weird kind of loyalty towards those who are actually harming or manipulating them.
Like a psychological survival thing?
Possibly.
Mm.
A kind of warped coping mechanism, perhaps, if people feel trapped or powerless to change the situation. Like maybe accepting the unacceptable feels safer than fighting back. It shows how deep these psychological responses can run.
It really feels like our collective alarm system is just broken or switched off.
That's what Pereira seems to be asking. Why doesn't our neural alarm go off loud and clear when we're facing obvious crises, obvious manipulation?
What reasons does she suggest?
Well, several possibilities. One is just sheer habituation. We're so constantly bombarded with bad news, crises, warnings.
We just get numb to it, desensitized.
Yeah, it's like living near an airport. Eventually, you just don't hear the planes anymore. Then there's learned helplessness.
The feeling that nothing you do matters anyway.
Right. If you feel like your individual actions won't make a difference, apathy can set in. Why bother trying?
And denial, just pretending the problem isn't there.
Denial or maybe unrealistic optimism. Defense mechanisms to avoid feeling totally overwhelmed by the scale of the problems.
She also mentions cognitive overload, right? Just too much information.
Yes. Too much complex, contradictory stuff coming at you, and the brain just kind of short circuits. It shuts down to cope.
Wow.
And she also wonders if maybe collectively we just haven't hit the threshold yet, the point where the suffering or the disappointment is so great that the pain of staying ignorant finally outweighs the discomfort of waking up.
And the consequence of this broken alarm.
Well, warnings get ignored, and often the people who do try to sound the alarm, the ones pointing out the inconvenient truth.
We get shot down. Labeled conspiracy theorists, troublemakers.
Exactly. It's a tactic, Pereira suggests, to maintain that collective blindness, to keep people from looking too closely. So yeah, multiple factors can silence that alarm.
It's a way to keep the comfortable illusion going. And she even connects this to history, doesn't she? Talking about civilizational resets.
She does. History's full of examples where societies collapsed or had to radically change course. But the threat she highlights now feels different.
How so?
She warns about the potential for a self-inflicted reset, not necessarily caused by outside forces, but by our own collective refusal to face reality, to learn from mistakes, to use our intelligence for good instead of, manipulation and self-destruction.
Which circles right back to her initial frustration, that feeling she describes, trying to wake people up, like drying ice, doing something futile.
Yeah, that sense of urgency and maybe despair.
Yeah.
She emphasizes that neurobusiness gives us the tools, the frameworks to understand why we do this, the self-deception, the apathy, the fear, the manipulation, even that social Stockholm Syndrome idea.
It helps explain the how and the why of choosing ignorance.
Absolutely. It shines a light on the underlying mechanics. But, and this is her crucial point, just understanding it isn't enough. Knowledge alone doesn't force change.
Right.
There has to be a choice, an individual choice, and maybe a collective one, to actually use that understanding, to consciously decide to open our eyes, step outside the comfort zone, face the difficult stuff, and take some responsibility.
Neurobusiness can show us the path, maybe map it out.
But it can't make us walk it. We have to choose to do that ourselves.
So, wrapping up this deep dive into Marynês Pereira's article, it really pushes you, doesn't it? Pushes you to think about your own blind spots.
Definitely. Where might you personally be choosing the comfort of not knowing over the sometimes difficult work of really engaging with what's going on?
It's a challenging question.
And it leaves us with Pereira's final, very stark thought. She asks us to consider whether the awakening will come before it's too late.
Or if we will confirm the saddest of prophecies, that the greatest threat to humanity resides ultimately within ourselves. Pretty heavy.
It really is a powerful note to end on.
So we've been exploring the ideas from the Anesthesia of Ignorance to the Discomfort of Consciousness, Hypocrisy and Voluntary Blindness, authored by Marynês Pereira. All the insights we discussed today stem from her work. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.